Today, we're going to travel back to the year 1215. We're going to look at a single piece of parchment, a document that was born from rebellion, sealed with anger, and really designed to fail. But instead, it changed the world. This is the story of Magna Carta, the Great Charter.
So let's go there. Picture this. It's June 15th, 1215. We're in a meadow called Runnymede, right beside the River Thames. England's King John is there, and believe me, he is furious. He's been completely humiliated. His most powerful barons have him surrounded, and they are forcing him to press his royal seal onto a document that they wrote. He has absolutely no choice in the matter.
And that quote really gets to the heart of it. The king never, ever wanted to agree to this. In fact, he tried to have the whole thing canceled almost immediately. And within a year, he'd be dead. But the document would survive. And it would go on to become the foundation of law and individual rights for billions of people around the globe. So, who were these barons? Were they heroes, fighting for the freedom of all people? Well, not exactly. Let's be really clear here. The men who cornered King John at Runnymede were not idealists. They were powerful, pretty ruthless landowners, and they were angry about very specific things the king had done to them. I mean, just look at this list. It pretty much breaks down just how terrible King John had been for them. He taxed them into the ground 11 times in 16 years. He took their family members as hostages just to keep them in line. He'd hit them with massive unfair fines for no good reason. And to top it all off, he was a disaster on the battlefield, losing a huge war in France and wasting all that tax money. So the tipping point came in the spring of 1215. The barons had finally had enough. They formally renounced their loyalty and marched on London, capturing the city. Now, for a king back then, losing London was a total catastrophe. Without its money and its power, John was finished. He was completely cornered. He had no choice but to sit down and negotiate. So let's actually look at the charter itself. The document the barons wrote had 63 different clauses. Now, a lot of them dealt with very specific medieval issues, things like fish traps on the River Thames or inheritance rights for widows. But hidden inside were a few clauses whose words would echo for centuries.
This is the big one, Clause 39. It sounds very formal, kind of wordy, right? No free man shall be seized, imprisoned. So what does it actually mean?
This, right here, this is the revolutionary idea. A ruler can't just lock you up and throw away the key because they feel like it. There has to be a proper legal process. This is the beginning of the right to a fair trial, the foundation of what we now call habeas corpus, that core principle that you can't be imprisoned unlawfully. It's incredible, but this clause is still part of English law today, over 800 years later. And there were other game changers, too. Clause 40 says, "To no one will we sell, deny, or delay right or justice." In other words, justice can't just be for the rich who can afford it. It has to be for everyone. And Clause 12, this one said the king couldn't just dream up new taxes whenever he wanted. He needed the common consent of the realm. This is the tiny seed that would one day grow into that huge idea, no taxation without representation. So, a great victory for freedom and justice, right? Well, not so fast. King John might have put his seal on that charter, but you can bet he had his fingers crossed behind his back. He never, ever intended to keep his promise. The timeline here is just wild. John seals the charter in June. He immediately writes to his powerful buddy, the Pope, who declares the whole thing illegal just 10 weeks later, in August. The barons, realizing they've been double-crossed, restart the civil war. They even invite a French prince to come and take the English throne. And then, right in the middle of all this chaos, King John gets sick and dies. And it looked like Magna Carta was dead, too. But then, the most unlikely hero emerges. John's 9-year-old son, the new King Henry III. He's just a kid, and his kingdom is being torn apart by civil war. So to win the barons back to his side, his advisors do something absolutely brilliant. They reissue Magna Carta in his name. They did it in 1216, then again in 1217. And finally, in 1225, a final version became a permanent part of English law. The promise breaker was gone, but his son had saved the promise. And from there, the ideas inside Magna Carta began a journey that no one in that meadow could ever have possibly imagined. An idea that would cross oceans and centuries. Just look at this path. The principles born in that English meadow in 1215 directly inspired the founding fathers of the United States when they wrote their Constitution over 500 years later. And those same ideas, that nobody is above the law and everyone has a right to justice, They formed the bedrock of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, from one muddy field in England to the entire world.
And the connection isn't just vague, it's incredibly direct. Just look at the words. Magna Carta says no free man can be imprisoned without lawful judgment. The U.S. Constitution's Fifth Amendment says no person shall be deprived of liberty without due process of law. It's the exact same idea, just evolved and expanded for a new time.
Okay, before we finish up, let's look at two fascinating facts that really put this all into perspective. And then we'll have a quick quiz to see what you've remembered.
What's with the number 4? Well, that's how many original copies of the 1215 Magna Carta still exist today. Just 4. And get this, in 2015, for the 800th anniversary, all 4 were brought together in the same place for the very first time. It's just amazing to think these fragile pieces of parchment even survived. And here's a really important, kind of inconvenient truth. The barons were not fighting for everybody. Clause 39 talks about free men, right? But back in 1215, most people in England were unfree peasants, called serfs, who had pretty much no rights at all under the charter. The barons were looking out for themselves. They were aristocrats protecting their own class. And yet, this is the perfect way to understand its legacy. The barons were selfish, sure, but the principles they wrote down, that leaders must obey the law, that justice isn't for sale, that people have rights the government can't just take away, those ideas were so powerful, they took on a life of their own. The ideas really did turn out to be bigger than the men who wrote them. All right, quiz time. First question, when and where was Magna Carta sealed? The answer is June 15th, 1215, at Runnymede Meadow. Question 2, what does Clause 39 of Magna Carta establish? It establishes the foundation for the right to a fair trial, or habeas corpus. Number 3, what happened to Magna Carta within 10 weeks of it being sealed? The Pope declared it null and void. Question 4, how did Magna Carta survive after King John tried to have it canceled? It was reissued by his young son, King Henry III. And our final question, how does Magna Carta connect to the United States Constitution? The Fifth Amendment's guarantee of due process of law is directly descended from Clause 39. That's it for this time. Join us for our next explainer when we ask, why did England and France go to war? We'll be looking at King Edward III, the beginning of the 100 Years' War, and the deadly longbow that changed warfare forever. See you then.